This is Perspective on Athletics, big thinking for small colleges. Sit back and enjoy this episode. Okay, we are here with Dr. Todd Hutton, president of Utica College, and Todd has been around the world of Division III athletics for quite some time and has done a lot of great things with athletics as well as the entire institution during his time at Utica. Todd, thanks so much for taking time. I appreciate you sharing some of your busy schedule with us.
You're very welcome, Mark.
Great. Well, this is always fun to have presidents involved in these conversations on perspective on athletics because I think presidents are very important, in particular at the small college level. And you've been a few different places. So I'm wondering, just for a little bit of context, can you give us just a brief thumbnail sketch of your academic career and your time at Utica and how long you've been there?
Absolutely. I started my academic career at a small institution in North Carolina called Duke University, and was a student there. So I was immersed in D1 athletics as a student. I went from there to Frostburg State University in the mountains of Maryland, another very fine state D3 institution, and had an opportunity to be there for 4 years. Then went on to Austin College in Sherman, Texas, another very fine D3 institution. And then from there to Willamette University as vice president. And again, a very fine Northwest D3 institution. There aren't many of them, actually, in the Northwest. They have to travel a long ways to get their games. And then from Willamette to Utica College in 1998 as president, and another D3 institution. So I've been at a whole series of D3s throughout my career.
You sure have, and that isn't because the Division I environment at Duke tainted your view of Division I at all, did it?
Absolutely not, although because I bombed out in the brackets, maybe I am tainted now about Division III. So my bracketology was destroyed early this year.
You're not the only one. So I'm sure people are sharing your pain. Well, I appreciate that. That helps us understand kind of where you've been across the country and within the world of athletics and the different stops that you've had. And one of the things I'm curious about from President's perspective is, as we look at collegiate athletics today, more globally, all we tend to hear about are the Division I problems. And today it's no different with lawsuits or unionization threats and all of these things going on. The NCAA is under fire, perhaps like it hasn't been in a long, long time. And so on a more general scale, when we think about collegiate athletics, I'm curious what your thoughts are to where we are today, what some of the challenges are, and where it really ought to be heading, you think?
I'll put it in the Division III perspective. I mean, D1 large programs are an entirely different world. Although I think many people, D1 is not a monolithic entity either. My alma mater, undergraduate alma mater, is Davidson College. It's a school of 1,700 students, very much like Hamilton, close by here, selective institution. They play D1. It's a very different institution than the University of Michigan, for example. So I think it's important for people to understand that this is not a monolithic organization. NC2A is not monolithic. It's not really monolithic even within the divisions. I think there's more consistency within D3 than there is within D1. So within all of the divisions, depending upon the institution, athletics should be part of the educational enterprise for the students. First and foremost, it's a co-curricular activity. You've got curricular activities and co-curricular activities. Athletics should be a co-curricular activity. That means it should have educational goals attached to those activities. It should have student learning outcomes attached to those activities. Here at Utica College, we have educational goals for students. Those goals hang on every coach's wall. I established those when I arrived. We judge coaches by how well they achieve those outcomes, along with what's the quality of the experience for the student. Win-loss record is probably third or fourth down the list for us. And it really fits into the quality experience formula. Students have a better experience when they have an opportunity to be competitive on any given day. You don't need national championships all the time. You don't need conference championships. But for students to have a good experience, they need to be able to have opportunities to win.
Right. So, and I think that makes a lot of sense, particularly within the Division III environment. And I do want to hear more about Utica because I think you're doing some wonderful things there. But when you think about education and learning outcomes for student athletes, do you think it's possible with where things are at the Division I level, or where maybe the priorities are in a little bit different area of the university? Where does that all fit, and can it fit, do you think, at the higher level?
I think it should fit. I think presidents need to take control once again at the Division I level. They need to say, this is first and foremost a co-curricular activity. This is not entertainment. Right now, the BCS schools, the big basketball programs, they're in the game of entertainment. And that's why coaches' salaries are as high as they are, because when you see baseball players with $250 million contracts, that's because they're in the business of entertainment. You see basketball coaches with football coaches. I'm thinking about the Alabama coach. Saban has like $4 million, $5 million per year. That's because it's entertainment. Presidents need to say, and boards need to say, this is now education. Northwestern, of all places, Northwestern is a very selective institution. I frankly don't know how they can be part of a lawsuit when these students are students first and foremost. They're there to get an education. They're not there to play football. And that's what I say to our students. I meet every prospective football player and parent. I am part of the recruiting process. And I have my little bag of tricks, and I pull out a football, and I hold it and say, you're here partly for this. This has been part of your life. Your aunts and uncles, your parents, your grandparents, your friends have been part of this. I said, and you want to start, you want to keep doing this activity for a little while longer? In 4 years, though, man, it's over. So the real reason you're here, and I pull in my little bag, and I pull out a mortarboard. I said, the real reason you're here is it's this. Now, these two go together very nicely. These make for a rich life now, and they prepare you for the future. But primarily, you're here for that mortarboard. And I said, if you don't walk across the stage in 4 years, or 5 years, depending upon the program you're in, then you failed yourself, you failed your parents, and we have failed you. So, I think that we have to understand that it's educational first and foremost.
Yeah, I'm sure that message coming from a college president is very, very powerful for a prospect and his or her parents. It's one thing for a coach to say it, but to have you doing that is very impressive, and I'm sure it rings true every time you do that trick from your bag of tricks. I want to step back. You touched upon this. You talked about presidential leadership or presidents regaining control or taking control. I want to ask you about the role of leadership in kind of where collegiate athletics is today, and you started talking about it in terms of presidential involvement. There are some people that think presidents maybe have been too involved and athletic directors too out of touch. What do you make sense of, where it all can kind of fit together, regardless of division? I think Division I is what most people are talking about, but can you speak to the leadership component to kind of look at the future of collegiate athletics?
Athletics have to fit in the strategic plan of the college. And they have to fit into the annual plans of the college, like any other program, like any other academic program. The president is, in my mind, the chief academic officer, the chief development officer. Everything should land on the president's desk at the 5,000-foot level or the 2,000, whichever level the president wants to be at. But a president has responsibility for ensuring that goals for athletics are established as part of a strategic vision and direction for the institution. It starts there, it trickles down or trickles sideways from there. So I think that leadership plays a crucial role, and presidents have to remain active, I think, on a daily basis. Here at UC, the athletic director reported to me directly for many years, and that person sat at the president's cabinet table. And the reason for that is that individual touched many students' lives, and I wanted access to that individual, and I want other executives around the table hearing from that person that had a significant academic or co-curricular program. I reorganized it so that the athletic director now reports directly to the provost, but has a very bold dotted line to me, so that for educational goals, for budget decisions, for decisions about positions, that person goes to the provost. For issues related to student conduct, NC2A regulations, compliance, it comes to me. So I know every time there's a red card in a soccer field, I'm notified. Anytime there's a flagrant technical foul in a basketball game, I'm notified. And the athletic director and I meet regularly to review NC2A, particularly the legislation that's coming up, of what position we will take, both in our conference and at the national convention.
Right. That's very interesting, the way that you've kind of delineated what you find out and what you don't necessarily need to find out about, because that really does split. There's this issue of should presidents be involved day to day or just on the 10,000-foot level, and you've kind of split the difference, and it seems to be working effectively there.
It does. The one problem the athletic director has with me is I'm over in the athletic center on a very regular basis, so he can't escape. I pop into offices all the time over there, so generally I'm in shorts.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're not looking over his shoulder though with every step of the way. So,
actually, the last thing I want to do is micromanage. I've got good people.
Yeah.
But we really worked so closely together in all of the areas that, if there's a facility being built, for example, one thing I found is I have a penchant for building stuff. And when we build, I get involved. So we're right now in the process of designing a sports dome, sports recreation dome. And I'm going to be down in the weeds. They'll make recommendations to me about how to configure the inside of this. But I'm going to be down in the weeds, talking about, do we need this, do we need that? Probably because I just enjoy it. Many other presidents don't need to be at that level, but I enjoy that.
Well, that's good. Well, this kind of transitions nicely into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, is that it's one thing to talk about big-time athletics, BCS schools, but athletics at a small liberal arts college in particular, small enrollments, there are many philosophies about the role, what athletics should do for a college like that. I'm curious to have you talk a little bit about what you think the role of athletics is at a small private college or a small college in general.
I'll give you some background at UC at the same time. When I arrived in 1998, we had 11 varsity sports, NC2A Division III sports. We had nearly a 70-30 split men-women on campus, 70% women, 30% men. I told the board at the first meeting that even though we're not a single-sex institution, we're beginning to look and feel like a single-sex institution. We had to take steps to balance the student body. One of those steps was to begin introducing more athletic programs, being mindful of Title IX as well. And for me, I don't just give a nod to Title IX. I believe deeply in Title IX. My daughter was the recipient of the benefits of Title IX. And I want the daughters of prospective spare parents to enjoy the benefits of Title IX. So we began adding programs. We added the big three. We added football, we added ice hockey, men's and women's, we added lacrosse, men's and women's, we added field hockey. So we added 14 varsity sports over about a 4-year period. So we went from 11 to 25 varsity sports. With only building, we built a stadium with turf, and that turf was multi-purpose. So it was permanently lined for field hockey and soccer and football, and we built a new locker room that served football in the fall and men's women's lacrosse in the spring, because it had a big garage door that closed, and offense, defense now became men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse. As I said, now we've grown to the point in terms of recreation and athletics that we have to have a sports dome with an indoor track. Because we have a very, very successful track team. We have no outdoor track. We have no field house with a track. We have an All-American hurdler who actually practiced in our gym in a hallway, running down a hallway, running hurdles. So we've done more with less throughout our history, but as I told our board, we have to give our students the proper environment. So again, athletics for us became a way to balance enrollment, to increase enrollment, and to create more vitality on campus. We've been a branch campus at Syracuse University for much of our history, and branch campuses behave a bit differently than independent institutions. And I really needed to create more of a sense of belonging at UC and vitality and the spirit of Utica College as opposed to the spirit of Syracuse University. Athletics was intended to do that as part of a strategic plan.
Interesting. You know, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. And unfortunately, one of the things that troubles me is that I think, like many institutions, enrollment is always an issue. Retention is always an issue. And many small colleges look to athletics to boost enrollment. But unfortunately, what I've seen is that they look to athletics to boost enrollment without any thoughtful planning about what they need to provide to support those athletic programs. And I'm wondering if you might speak to that, because I know you more than doubled the size of your sports program. But it sounds like you had some thoughtful discussions and planning that went into those decisions about why you made the decisions, which sports to add and why and when. So I'm wondering if you can just speak to that for a minute.
Again, it started with what we called a 3-year action plan when I arrived. The board asked me to develop a strategic plan within 3 months, and I went to them and said, I'm very sorry, but I can't do that and I won't do that. And I went home to my wife that night and I said, this would be the shortest presidency in history, because I just told the board no after 2 weeks of being on campus. What I told them is that I could develop a short-term action plan, but strategic plans have to be engage the campus community, have to be participatory, and it would take 12 to 18 months to do a proper strategic plan. So we developed this action plan that involved the campus, but in a very compressed way. What are the issues facing us? What are the key issues, and how do we address those issues? Enrollment was one of them, and the need to brand the institution was another, to get a strategic and integrated marketing plan in place. So we went about this from a strategic perspective. Then for every sport that we developed a full business plan using a business plan model. And actually, we took the business plan for football and field hockey, because they were introduced simultaneously, and then for lacrosse. And that business plan we actually presented to a bank to get funding for the stadium. So we used a very disciplined process, and that business plan looked at advantages and pitfalls. It built the revenue model, the expense model associated with the programs. It anticipated potholes along the way. It anticipated student behavior issues, because when you introduce new programs, you had to be very mindful of a new program coming in and the culture around that program. We established values related to the programs. Part of it was we had to find the right people to lead programs that brought the value structures that we wanted. So we used a very comprehensive, very disciplined approach to adding sports.
Wow. That's wonderful. And you illustrated my point exactly, I think, that if you put some thought and planning into something, it can really turn out to be a huge benefit for the entire campus. So I appreciate you sharing that. It sounds like it's worked out wonderfully. I'm curious next. I know that you've played a big role in the leadership of your conference, the Empire 8. And again, comparing Division III small colleges with the big time world of BCS, there's all sorts of conference hopping and shifting going on at that level still. Some of that started happening in Division III a few years back related to automatic qualification. But I'm wondering if you can speak to the Empire 8, the conference, the role that conferences play, and what that means to the small college environment. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Conferences help create a sense of identity for a collective of institutions. And generally, you have institutions that are similar types of institutions who are affiliated with one another. It creates, again, it reinforces the values of the institutions. It reinforces the emphasis on the educational enterprise. It provides for a very good competition, frankly, and you develop out of conferences very interesting rivalries that take on different flavors. I think conferences are really crucial today to not just to AQ. Frankly, I have a little bit of an issue with AQs at this point, and having AQs driving decisions, any number of decisions. It's a reality, though. If you don't have an AQ, you have to fight harder to get into postseason competition. That's where I know in the NC2 over the last 15 years, it's been talked about no national championships, but only regional championships. There's something to be said for that. I think the reality is, in this country, we like to see national champions as opposed to 4 or 5 regional champions. But conferences, most importantly, really I think, are designed not only to provide good competition, but to reinforce the educational values of the institution. The Empire 8, we're very fortunate. Chuck Matrano is a superb commissioner. Started out as what I euphemistically say, a young whippersnapper, because he was very formative when he started as a commissioner, and has grown into being one of the real leaders in Division III today. And we are known for good, high-quality sportsmanship. Chuck has been at the forefront of that in the country. And, excuse me, that drives how we organize games, game management, our expectations regarding student behavior. It's no nonsense. For example, in ice hockey, if you get thrown out of a game, coach or player, no matter who you are, you sit the next game. You may sit 2 games, but at minimum, you sit 1 game. And we've had that happen in any number of sports. And the AD contacts me right away, and we had a circumstance this year in another sport. The next game was an away game, and I said, "Coach is suspended. Coach does not travel with the team. Coach stays home. We have an assistant coach. That assistant coach will coach that evening." So, and we've seen initiatives within our conference begin in the conference and then strengthen how we operate our own sports.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, I've noticed several times throughout our discussion so far, you've mentioned student behavior, sportsmanship-related issues, and I know that's a big part of your conference ethos, and I'm sure on your campus as well, based on the things that you've said. I'm curious your thoughts on the role that coaches play. And the reason I ask about that is that sometimes people will assume a coach's job is 3 months out of the year, show up during the sports season, throw the balls out, coach them on skills, and then they go home. And a lot of people miss out on really the valuable role that coaches play in a number of different ways. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the role of a coach, especially at a small college.
First and foremost, coaches are mentors and teachers. First and foremost, they can have a significant impact on a young person's development. The educational goal to which I spoke, the values of the institution need to be inculcated in that coach, and that coach needs to transfer those to his or her players and students. Coaches, though, have multiple roles, not the least of which is they are an integral part of the enrollment team, the admissions team for a campus. We have our undergraduate student body is 2,200 full-time students. Our athletics, about 650 full-time. So more than 25% of our students are student athletes. So that's a critical piece of the enrollment puzzle every year. It's also a critical piece of retention. And we see coaches as being integral to the retention effort as well. Last spring, we have 25 teams, as I mentioned. 17 out of those 25 had GPAs of 3.0 or better. That speaks to retention. Now, our retention rates aren't as high as I would like to see among student athletes. That said, we also have students that are performing overall at a higher level than the overall student body. GPA, student body, the GPA overall for all athletic programs is about 2.9. The student body is about 2.8. So our student athletes are performing at a little bit higher rate than the overall student body.
No, that's great. I think you spoke very well to the role that coaches play and the impact that they have. It's those relationships between coaches and student athletes that impact so many of those areas that you talked about. We're getting towards the end of our time here, and one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I ask all presidents this. I was an athletic director for many years, and I worked for a few different people, but I know that myself and my colleagues, we always would talk about our presidents and what is the president going to think about this, or what's the president going to do. So this little segment I kind of like to call, what should athletic directors know about presidents and what you're thinking? So I'm wondering what you might share.
I think that I'm thinking about succession planning right now. There are a point at which I will be retiring in the future. I don't have a date yet, but I will have to coach my current executive staff on how they need to approach a new president. So with the athletic director, for example, that'll be top of mind for me in 3 years or so. I think that Dave Fontaine, our athletic director, will need, first of all, to know and understand the president's commitment to and understanding of collegiate athletics. Presidents come from all walks of life today. There is no one stereotypic path to a presidency today. In years past, more often than not, it would be an academic vice president moving into the presidency. Today, there are multiple pathways, from enrollment to development, outside corporate CEO becoming a president. And I think it's important that an athletic director understand what the president will bring to the institution and what understanding that person will have, and how can the president add value to the athletic program. I think I think an AD has to understand that early on. And I think in my case, an AD needs to understand how much detail does a president need to know, how much do they want to know. So there's both how much do they need to know and how much do they want to know. And an AD really needs to figure that out early on. In fact, I would even ask that directly of an AD, of a president. If I'm an AD and I'm meeting a president, I would ask that question. AD says, I think I know what you need to know, because the NC2A helps prescribe that. The institutional factors, we could talk about, but how much do you want to know? And I think that's crucial. And you'll get different answers. I mean, I know presidents that want to be as far away from athletics as they possibly can, and meet just the minimum requirement that the NC2A calls for. And others want to be very close. And frankly, within our conference, we don't have anybody who's far away saying, "Stay away from me." Come in occasionally, but we still have a range of involvement in athletics within our own conference. And I probably fall down on the side of being in the weeds, not management, but just involvement. I mean, I like to be around the students, and I'll pop into coaches' offices and say hi to them, that type of thing. I'll walk into Michelle Davis, who's our basketball coach, and I'll ask her, "How's recruiting coming? What's it look like for next year?" And, I talked, as I mentioned, I talked to all prospective student athletes who want to play football and their parents. I'm one of those who engages a lot. But I think that, again, ADs need to ascertain that pretty early on.
I think that's the key, and it comes down to, I think, the relationship between a president and the athletic director, the president and the coaches. I think the more visible a president is, generally, the better it is, but it's all for an AD and the coaches to figure out because, like you said, presidents are different and they're coming at it from different angles. Todd, this has been a wonderful discussion, and you've shared a lot of great information and a lot of great perspective that I think is going to be very helpful for people. And again, for a president to take time out of his or her very busy schedule, I want to thank you again for taking time out and sharing your thoughts with us.
Mark, you're most welcome. I'm happy I can contribute in some way.
Great. And maybe once you get to that point of retirement, we can have you back and we can talk more about an ex-president's perspective on athletics these days.
I would enjoy that, and I'll be back in the Northwest upon retirement. So I already built a house in the Puget Sound area.
That's terrific. Well, it's beautiful out here without a doubt. Well, we're going to wrap up this episode. This has been Perspective on Athletics with Dr. Todd Hutton, president of Utica College. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mark.